to be, from what I understand, and I've not seen too much about it, to be very much based on the Skull and Bones Society.
Sounds very much like it to me from what I've read. It says above the title here on their website, a secret society so powerful it can give you everything you desire at a price.
That is a wonderful summary of the way it works. And there's a lot of people who are making a lot of money and having a very nice material life as a result of being in these secret societies, and therefore having access to promotion and to contracts that won't go to other people. But the price is the key, and the price is you never say no. And
that sounds like the mafia, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, the mafia is just a kind of part of the web, really, with this interlocking leadership in the end. And it's amazing the ratio of members of the Skull and Bones Society that end up in positions of power. But again, you don't say no. You take the rewards, but you don't say no to whatever you're asked. I don't know whether you've ever seen, Jeff, I saw it on video. It was a book, I think, of a film, a movie called The Brotherhood of the Bell, I think. And it starred Glenn Ford. And basically this movie was about a secret society. And Glenn Ford, the movie opens with Glenn Ford and this other guy initiating a new man into the secret society. And Glenn Ford's a very wealthy man. And he gets a package very early in the film from this Brotherhood of the Bell, i.e. the Skull and Bones Society, the Freemasons, etc. And it says that his job, his order, is to make sure that a friend of his, a Russian dissident, does not get the job at the university, which the university were likely to offer him, because they wanted one of their guys to get that job, one of their secret society guys. And Glenn Ford sort of complained about this, and then there was this very powerful scene when this guy high up in the secret society came along and told him the facts of life. If you want lots of wealth and influence and power, and you want these contracts to keep going your way, you do not say no. And he went away and did as he's told, and as a result of not getting the job, the Russian dissident friend committed suicide. And in a massive guilt, Glenn Ford tries then to expose how this secret society is actually controlling the institutions with an interlocking leadership. And of course they first of all destroyed his father's business, who was a member of this organization and was wealthy as a result of it. And then they destroyed Glenn Ford. And when Glenn Ford eventually gets on the television, the people in the television company who were also connected to this same secret society made him look a complete idiot and eventually destroyed him, his credibility. And that was a wonderful summary and cameo of the way it works, and the Skull and Bones will be just like that.
Here's another email from Rich in Oklahoma. Wants to point out one thing. He says, I'm a very big fan of Mr. Icke and have read all three of his books, or three of them at least. But I feel I need to point out that Planned Parenthood also, at least in this country, delivers a lot of much-needed prenatal care to low-income women who could not otherwise afford the same elsewhere.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the point. You know, if people see the world in black and white, they've lost the plot, because it's always a shade of gray. You know, you can't have an organization. And again, the vast majority of people, because of the pyramid nature, the compartmentalized pyramid nature of all these organizations, the vast majority of people who work for Planned Parenthood, like I have to say, probably the vast overwhelming majority of Freemasons, are totally innocent people, and I'm sure very genuine people that want to help women in America, and even in the third world, believe they are genuinely doing a job that's right and good for the people. It's the top of the pyramid that I'm focusing on, and when you are orchestrating a malevolent agenda, you have to, as with Freemasons, as with all these organizations, cast in front of you an innocent shield behind which you can hide. So all these organizations that are working in a very malevolent way in certain aspects to advance this agenda have also parts of their operation that are doing very good work. And it's behind that very good work that the malevolence hide. So the gentleman from Oklahoma, I couldn't agree with more. I mean, I hold my hand up. He's absolutely right. But that positive side of these organizations is absolutely necessary if the malevolent is going to stay hidden.
Okay, in Spokane, listening on KSBN is John. Hello, John. Come on board here, and let's hear what you have to say.
Hi, Jeff and David. How are you doing tonight?
All right, mate.
Great. Well, I've listened to you before, so I'm not a newcomer to your ideas, and I find many of them very interesting and quite sensible, really, when you start thinking about it. I was a little surprised by your comment regarding religion, but when I thought it over, I realized that what you're saying is that many of the established institutionalized religions are so ingrained in their ritual that they do become a form of mind control. But I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, is it possible for some great person who rises up in the world, specifically Jesus, to be apart from this system? Who, in your opinion, is Jesus?
Oh my goodness me! How many days have we got?
Well, we only have about 40 minutes left.
See, I have to say, let me start off by saying this. I think if we are going to have the world of freedom that we all claim to want, then we have to be at peace with others having different beliefs to us. And therefore, I have absolute respect for those who wish to believe in a literal Jesus, for those who wish to follow the Christian religion. I have no problem with that at all. I have a simple philosophy: do what you like so long as you don't impose it on anyone else. But just as I'm at peace with people having that belief, I just ask in return that maybe people should have peace with me having a different view. And when I've looked back at the evidence that Jesus was a literal person rather than a symbolic one, I simply can't see the evidence. And I must say, I have no interest whatsoever in Jesus not existing. It really, frankly, does not matter either way to me. But when you think that the Jesus story was repeated over and over again in the case of endless deities thousands of years before Christianity. When you think that back in Babylon, for instance, where the blueprint of control by religion began, that they had three deities, Nimrod, the father, who they symbolize as a fish, Tammuz, Ninus, the son, and they said the father and son were one, and Queen Semiramis, the female of the deity, and the Trinity, which they symbolize as a dove. And what they said about Tammuz, the son of Nimrod, in that Trinity, was that he died to save the sins of humanity, in effect, in their way of saying it. They put him, when they killed him, in a tomb and rolled a rock across the front, and 3 days later they rolled the rock back, and Tammuz, Ninus had gone. And again, you look at Mithra, who was a sun god of the Roman Empire, and into Persia, and indeed Mithra artifacts were found in Britain. And what they said about Mithra, he was born to a virgin mother, born on December the 25th, which was the birthday, the symbolic birthday of the sun, the literal sun in the sky in the ancient world, because it was 3 days after the winter solstice. And at the winter solstice, they said symbolically the sun had died as it reached the lowest point of its cycle in the northern hemisphere, and 3 days later they said it had started its progression to the peak of its power in the summer, and therefore December the 25th they said the sun, the literal sun, was born. And this is why you find deity after deity in the ancient world, long before Christianity, given the birthday of December the 25th. Also, again, Mithra, this sun god, born on December the 25th to a virgin mother, according to the stories, died to save the sins of humanity. And they use terms like the vine and what have you, the same terms that they use in relation to the Jesus story. The Lamb of God who died so our sins could be forgiven goes back thousands of years before Christianity, when they used to literally sacrifice lambs at Easter to appease the gods, so the gods would look kindly on them. So, it's there's so much to look at, and if people are going to have a balanced view of possibility, then surely this information has to be out there, as well as the Christian party line.
Okay, we're going to pause on that note. Come right back in a couple minutes with David Icke. Don't forget to visit his website at davidicke.com. Here's an interesting note from Aaron, one of our listeners in Toronto, David. Says the movie The Skulls was filmed in Toronto.
How appropriate.
It's a good one. All right, the American so-called presidential sweepstakes well underway. Some people call it the presidential sideshow, one of the greatest acts of societal and political misdirection of all time. But we are also faced with the potential of George Bush Jr. being in office maybe for 8 years. And if he is, in fact, the next president, where would that leave George Sr.? Some are suggesting that it'll put George Sr. back in the White House for 8 years, and maybe another 8 after that if the governor of Florida should happen to want to become president as well. 16 more years of Bushes?
Well, this is a subject in which so many things connect. I talk about the bloodlines, which I would strongly suggest goes back to an interbreeding program between some otherworldly race thousands and thousands of years ago and humanity, which manifested in bloodlines which were put into positions of ancient ruling royal power, which is where we get the theme from of the divine right of kings, the divine right to rule by your bloodline. And that these, when you look at the genealogy that is being put together from the various sources, these bloodlines have actually ended up in the positions of power, coming out of the ancient Near Middle East into Europe to become the European aristocracy and the royal families, including the present royal family of Britain. And then through the Great British Empire, not a lot great about it, I must say, we talked about earlier, these bloodlines went all over the world. And when you do the genealogy of American presidents and key people in positions of power, it's extraordinary. I mean, they're all related. 33 of the 42 American presidents go back to Charlemagne, including George Bush and George W. Bush, of course. Charlemagne being the most famous monarch of what we now call France, and a major point in the history of the Illuminati. Now, because of this obsession with bloodline, you start to realize that American presidents are not elected by ballot. They are selected by blood, which is why I was able to identify some considerable time ago now, before there was any mention of him running, that I felt George W. Bush would be the next president of the United States. Now, we'll see if that turns out to be true, because Al Gore's one of their guys also. But certainly he's now one step away from it. And I must say, I had to laugh, really, when I was turning on CNN and NBC, and they were saying, oh, John McCain's doing well. Oh, my goodness, John McCain, is he going to win? I mean, and it's not like that. I mean, they stitched up the Republican votes necessary. Never mind what the public think. They stitched up the votes in the Republican Party necessary to make sure George W. Bush was going to be the candidate. And when you look at him, I mean, they've got a lot of work to do, and I perhaps wouldn't like to be Al Gore in the next few months if he shows any sign of winning. They've got to do well and work hard, because it seems to me that George W. Bush, I don't know whether it's the interbreeding or what, he seems to me to be the Dan Quayle of the new millennium. I mean, it's just extraordinary. And there was a wonderful thing, by the way, just to mention what happened in Canada. I actually used it in my talk, last Sunday. It was so funny. There's a program up there called 22 Minutes. It comes out of Newfoundland, and it's incredibly irreverent. And what it did, because George W. Bush, I can't remember the names of foreign leaders, they went to one of his primaries in Michigan, and claiming, this is Canadian television, and they invented a new Prime Minister of Canada. The Prime Minister of Canada is Jean Chrétien. They invented a new Prime Minister called Jean Poutine. Now, poutine is a French-Canadian dish, which is French fries with cheese.
Yep.
So what they were actually saying was the Canadian Prime Minister, Jean French Fries with Cheese, endorses the candidacy of George W. Bush, and they talked to his aides and the governor of Michigan. They talked to George W. Bush, and all the time they're saying the Canadian Prime Minister, Jean Poutine, French Fries with Cheese. And not one of them reacted to it except to say, yes, I agree. I think he's absolutely right to endorse George Bush, and George Bush comes on and says, yes, he's a very good man. I mean, this is French fries with cheese. I mean, where are we? I mean, he's just across the border. I mean, you'd think the future president of the United States would know who the Canadian Prime Minister is. What you said earlier about George Bush Sr. having another 4 to 8 years in the White House is certainly correct, and the people above him, because George W. Bush really will be in there as a puppet, a placeman who will just do whatever he's told, which is the role of American presidents.
It really doesn't matter a whole heck of a lot who's in the White House.
It doesn't. And we have this fantasy where they call the President of the United States the most powerful man in the world. Nothing like. They place them there. See, the people, obviously, who are really orchestrating this global agenda, they don't put themselves into positions where they can be identified and targeted like presidents and head of this or head of that. I mean, we talk about the Rothschilds, we talk about the Rockefellers, but they're still operational level people. They're still in places where they can be identified, pointed at, and targeted in terms of research into their operations. They try to keep them very secret, of course, but they're still there and nameable. The people who are really orchestrating this are above them and certainly not seen in the public arena. They're people that the public would never recognize their names. They operate really from the shadows, and the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds are subordinate to them, as are the Queen and the royal family of Britain. But again, we don't see them, or we don't know them, because they just don't put their head above the parapet where we can see them.
True enough, there is talk today now of a woman vice presidential candidate, Elizabeth Dole, coming on the Bush ticket.
Well, Elizabeth Dole, I mean, again,
there's another one.
Bob Dole has been a puppet of this group. Bob Dole was put up at the last election to lose. That was the idea, because they wanted Clinton to have a second term, just as Michael Dukakis was put up to lose when George Bush Sr. Went for the presidency after his 2 years of vice president, in fact president, during the official Reagan years. And I remember being in Britain at the time, not being into any of this research, and I was saying, this guy Dukakis isn't trying what's going on. Well, now I realize. And Elizabeth Dole was, of course, head of the Red Cross, and the Red Cross, its very symbol is the one that the Templars use, the Knights Templar, and of course is also the flag of England, and goes back to the ancient Phoenicians. It was a major symbol, the fire cross of the Phoenicians, who traveled the world and took the culture out of the Near and Middle East all over the world, not least to Britain.
Fascinating. Hold on, we'll pause, come right back with David Icke, and we're right after this. And we are back with David Icke. One thing in England, David, I believe the political campaign season is it's a measured 6 weeks or 8 weeks or something. There's a finite time to it, isn't there?
It's actually at its heart, at its focus, only about 3. And the sitting Prime Minister calls the election whenever he chooses within 5 years of being elected. I mean, he can he can be elected, and according to the law, he can call another election within a few weeks if he wants. And this has happened in hung parliaments when the government has not had a working majority, and then they have basically a 3-week campaign. And then they have the election. So the American system, which draws it out and draws it out and draws it out, is very, very different. But what I was just very quickly saying about the Red Cross is a classic organization which falls into the pyramidal structure. The vast majority of people working for the Red Cross are genuine people who want to help the world, but at the top, that is another organization that's used to advance the agenda. It allows people to get into countries at war and orchestrate and what have you under the guise of the Red Cross. And Anthony Sutton's excellent and scholarly works into who funded the Russian Revolution and who funded Hitler show that it was an American Red Cross mission, quote, that went into Russia and actually did the spade work that led to the Russian Revolution and the funding of it. And that Red Cross mission had a handful of doctors, and it was supposed to be helping people with medicine and stuff, and a mass of major financiers. It had a major donation from the Morgan Empire, and the head of the Federal Reserve New York Bank was the head of the mission, and some of the doctors came home. In fact, all the doctors eventually came home. They were so disgusted. It was nothing to do with medicine. It was to do with finance. So Elizabeth Dole ending up as the wife of this long-time Illuminati puppet, Bob Dole, ending up as head of the Red Cross in the United States was extremely understandable and predictable. And the fact that she's now being suggested as a running mate for George W. doesn't surprise me either.
One of your fans wants to know when you'll be touring Eastern Canada, Toronto, or Ottawa again.
Well, I've been invited. This will set them off in Canada again. I've been invited to speak in Montreal in the mid-May, so that's probably the next time I'm going to be there.
All right. Back to the phones, I think. On the lines now is Bonnie in Portland. Are you there, Bonnie? Hello, Bonnie. Hey, Bonnie. She's not there. 1-800-876-4123 if you'd like to call in. Our remaining time with David Icke. The stock market, David, continues to expand like the biggest balloon in history. Well,
again, when you look at the present financial system, red flags and alarm bells are going off for me, I must say. Throughout history, certainly modern history, the scam has been played of pushing interest rates down, getting people to take out more loans, and of course, the difference between a boom and a bust is the amount of money in circulation. That's all. When we have a depression, it's not because people have decided they don't want to eat or they want to sleep in the street instead of have a home. It's because there's not enough money in circulation to create the economic activity for those things to be paid for. So there is this create the boom, which is to push the stock market up well beyond the real value of the companies being quoted. And I think these internet companies are going to crash massively eventually, because it's all on speculation and projecting forward and not on asset value and income now. And it's to push interest rates down and to put lots of money into circulation by banks making loans, which is how the vast overwhelming majority of money comes into circulation.
Tell us, David, how banks make loans again. It's such a beautiful story.
When you go to a bank, we apparently borrow money. That's what we think we're doing. But, of course, because the same people that have controlled the banks also have controlled the politicians who pass legislation over the years, banks are allowed to lend at least 10 times, and in the end, because of the way they play the game, vastly more than that, at least 10 times what they have on deposit. So every time you put $1 in a bank, you're giving it the right to lend 10 it doesn't have and charge interest on it. And so what you've got is the people and businesses and countries, the government, on behalf of the country, up to their neck in debt on money that has never, does not, and will never exist. It's just fresh air. It's an illusion, figures on a screen. And people have the impression that money comes into circulation through the government. Well, overwhelmingly, money comes into circulation by private banks making loans called credit. And so what they do, and this scam has been played again and again, is they put lots of credit into circulation, they push the stock market up, and they create this boom by putting money into circulation. And at the optimum time, they then start pushing interest rates up. They crash the stock market, and they take money out of circulation by not making so many loans. And because, of course, when they push interest rates up, more and more money, which was circulating with people buying things and therefore needing things and jobs and everything like that go up, more and more money is actually going out of circulation to pay the higher interest rates to the banks. And once you start taking money out of circulation, there's not enough money circulating to keep the economic activity going. Therefore, suddenly we move from a boom into a bust, and people lose their jobs. They can't pay the loans they've taken out in the boom times. They can't finance their lifestyle anymore because they've lost massively on the crash stock market. And what happens, of course, is that when you lend non-existent fresh air from banks, you have to sign over your wealth that does exist, your business, your land, your home, to get the loan of fresh air. So when you can't pay the loan back because now there's depression been manufactured, the banks get your wealth that does exist, your land, your home, your business. And in this way, this throw the fishing line out and pull the fishing line in boom-bust cycle, totally manipulated. These few that control the banks have sucked the real wealth of the world out of circulation, out of the general population, and left us with confetti money to operate on, which only has value because we take it seriously. And certain alarm bells, if you look back, start to occur and appear when a boom is about to be burst, and one is pushing oil prices up. Because when you push gas prices up, it's not just more money to pay at the pump to fill your car up. It's actually every single thing, and it is almost everything that exists that you buy needs to be transported to where you buy it. Therefore, all those prices go up, and all the airfares have gone up as a result of this. And I think the stock market boom doesn't have long left, and I've always felt that the spring, maybe May, was a time when a lot of economic cards are going to be played and a lot of economic shocks are going to hit us. But we'll see if that's true. But certainly, I can see the bust coming now.
Okay, be right back. Our last segment with David Icke. If you want to call in, 1-800-876-4123. Okay, back with David Icke. Let's go to the phones, and Bonnie is back from Portland, listening on KOTK. Hello, Bonnie. Go right ahead.
Hi, Jeff. Hi, David.
Hello, Bonnie.
I've been to your seminar here in Portland.
Oh, right. That was a long time ago now.
The Biggest Secret.
All right.
And I believe everything you say because all you have to do is look around and you can see it happening. I don't know why anybody wouldn't believe everything you say because it's just, if they read anything, they know it's true. And this, what you were just talking about with the banks and everything, it brings up is the reason we had our first depression, and which they want to bring on World War III. They aren't as brilliant as people think they are because they practiced these games for so darn many years that they have it memorized. You know, the Illuminati.
Okay, do you have a question for David, Bonnie?
When are you coming to Portland, David?
Okay.
Whenever I'm asked, really.
Well, I've asked you.
But the point you make are extremely valid. First of all, of course, you need to look back to 1929 and the depression that followed that, and the fact that they actually were doing the same in Germany at the same time. Just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. And both Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Adolf Hitler came to power in 1933 with almost identical economic policies to solve the problem of the massive depressions that the country's faced. And of course, if you control the flow of money and what have you, and the flow of the information through the media, you can crash a stock market and crash a country's economy whenever you want. I mean, what is the stock market? It's just based on people's confidence or lack of it. If you suppress confidence, then the stock market's going to crash. It's that simple. And I have this kind of dream that one day I might have a television program where we do financial reports from Las Vegas, because that's exactly what's happening in Wall Street in the City of London. It's like going over to, hello John, what's going on in what's going on in Caesar's Palace today? Oh well, blackjack's very popular today, John. A lot of people playing blackjack, and a lot of people playing poker over here. Yeah, but poker's being a bit depressed. There's a few people have pulled away from that game. That is exactly what financial reports from Wall Street and the City of London are. They are just reports on a casino. And it's just like playing blackjack or anything else, and it's all about confidence, and suppressing confidence is very easy. You just get Alan Greenspan, who's big time one of the gang, the Federal Reserve head, Bilderberg Group, to make a statement that questions his confidence in the economy, and bingo, down it goes. It's that simple. Right. I had a friend, or a kind of an acquaintance I met, who heard me speak at a financial conference about these things, and he was very, not very kind of impressed to start with. He thought this was a bit far-fetched, but he made his money, and still does, out of the futures markets and all this stuff, and he thought, I'll go away and I'll watch the stock market, and I'll watch the markets in relation to what, Ike says is going on. And he came back to me. I met him about 3 months later, and he said, my goodness, it's amazing. He said, about 3 days before Alan Greenspan makes a statement on the economy, he said the major movers in the markets either get out of something and into something else. They get massively out of something and massively into something else. He said, and 3 days later, when Greenspan makes his statement, it always has the effect of suppressing what these guys have got out of and pushing up what they've got into. Why? Because they're writing Greenspan's statement.
Guy Carr, that wrote Pawns of the Game, he was a Canadian, and he was high up in the ranks of the military in Canada. And he was so wise to all of this that he wrote the whole history of Europe and what happened and what they did to all the countries in Europe, in Spain and Germany and all over. He just told people. I'm surprised the Canadian people don't know it.
Well, it's amazing how much tremendous knowledge, vital knowledge, the general population don't know even exists. And this is the thing, you see. What you get, and I've got it, when I've talked about some of the more bizarre aspects of what I've uncovered, is people hear an opening line like, for instance, a few centuries ago, people said, the earth was round, and people's immediate reaction, because they just heard that one line and nothing more, well, don't be so bloody stupid, it can't be round, because what about the people on the bottom? They'd fall off. But when they hear, excuse me, can I just tell you about the law of gravity, suddenly that opening line, which seems bizarre at first, becomes, law of gravity, so they wouldn't fall off, and it becomes more and more sensible. And it's the same with the kind of stuff we're talking about. People hear one line, a few people control the world, and they think it's impossible, it's ludicrous, and that's where it stops. They don't do any research, and therefore they don't realize the massive amount of documentation there is to support this. And the other thing that you mentioned earlier, which I think is very relevant to today, is that, you can see it all around you. Right. And I think this is why it's such an important time, and we have this window of opportunity to bring about this change and this understanding of the true nature of what's been going on.
Okay, Bonnie, let
me say one more thing.
Real quick, Bonnie, go ahead, really quick.
This week I just heard about the truckers, the independent truckers.
Right.
There's 32,000 that had to turn their trucks back because they couldn't afford the gas prices.
That's right.
So what will that do in the grocery stores?
Well, you know what it'll do. It'll push the prices, as David said, of everything across the board. It's going to push them right up, because that's how America and the world basically moves most of its product anymore. Thanks, Bonnie. Take care. Okay, also in Portland tonight, listening on Hot Talk, KOTK, is Rob. It's your turn, Rob. Come on.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi.
Excellent show, as always.
Thank you.
David, you're in top form tonight.
Thanks, Rob.
And I, too, would like to vote with Bonnie. I want you to come to Portland, too.
Yeah, well, we'll see what we can do then.
Okay, good.
The Guy Royal, my partner who puts my events on, well, he's listening tonight. So,
Great.
Well, let's look at Portland then, Royal.
Yeah.
And I'd like to go up there because there's a lot of open-minded people in that area.
Yeah.
And the more that this information can circulate, the quicker that the veil will lift.
Absolutely. I do have a question. I wondered if you wanted to make a comment on the North Carolina kinder care situation. What's the latest on that, if you would care to talk about it?
Well, for those who haven't been in my website, I've been inundated from around the world with, over the years, with stories from children and their parents of how they have told, on the face of it, bizarre and astonishing stories of how they have, during their time in preschools and what have you, been subjected to satanic ritual, how they've seen animals sacrificed in front of them, how they've seen children, babies sacrificed in front of them. And it's as one judge said in America, there's flames pouring through the roof, there's smoke pouring from every window. I therefore have to assume the house is on fire. These kids of 3, 4, and particularly 5, 6, that kind of age, are telling these stories in astonishingly common supporting detail. And there was a boy called Zach in a North Carolina preschool who told the same story. And it's a classic of its kind because the investigation is nil. I mean, the parents have moved from North Carolina because they fear for themselves and for Zach to the West Coast, and the whole lives have been turned upside down as a result of it. And the police, although another boy at the school is telling the same story of what happened to him, in the most amazing detail, things that little kids like that would never know. I mean, Zach is even talking about the Anunnaki, who he said he heard being talked about. Anyway, I went to the police, and the police investigation, as usual in these cases, is just pathetic. They have, it broke in November, we're now in March. They still have not been to the school and interviewed other parents there to see if they've had any similar experiences or any evidence from their own children.
They haven't been to the school yet,
the whole lid's been put on it, as it always is.
No, they haven't been to the school yet?
They've been to the school. They have not to talk to the people involved. And incidentally, two of the 3 people that this boy Zach names suddenly were removed from the preschool at the time he came out and named these people, because he named them to a doctor who immediately went to the social services. But they have not been and interviewed the other parents at the school to ask them if they have any evidence or any experiences that their children might have had something similar, until the parents flew back to North Carolina about a week ago to hand out leaflets to the parents. Those other parents had no idea that any of these allegations had been made. And the organization involved is called KinderCare, which is now based in Portland, and the owners of KinderCare are KKR, Kohlberg, Kravis, and Roberts. And Kravis is one of the major funders of George Bush's election, and he was chairman of the fundraising committee of George Bush's election to presidency in the 1988. And he's a very close friend of the Bush family. So, they're connected into all the network, KKR, the famous organization that buys up companies and then tears them apart and sells them at a profit. They were the people that bought Nabisco. They also owned R.J. Reynolds, the tobacco company I mentioned earlier, at one time also.
Okay, Rob, I hope that helped. We're out of time here. It's all on David Icke's website, that whole tawdry, awful story at davidicke.com. Thanks, Rob. David, we have just about a minute and a half left at the most. No, not even that, so wrap it up for us.
Well, I must say, bringing it to a positive note, I really did see an energy shift this week in Vancouver, which I think is something that reflects what's going on in the world, where the energy of suppression, the one that wishes to stop this information getting out, threw every card it could, and in the end it was like just pushing a fly away with the energy of the people in Vancouver who made sure that freedom and freedom of expression and this information was made available to anyone that wanted it. So I think we've reached a point where the tide has turned.
David, always a pleasure, an honor, and I consider you a great friend and a great speaker, and I thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. See you again.
Take care.
Bye.
Good night.